attending today. So just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. If you have any questions for the Q&A session at the end, please pop them in the Q&A box. So that's at the bottom of the screen. Please put them in the Q&A box, and we will answer them as we go along, and we'll pick out any questions that we can ask Lindsay at the end of the presentation. Please put the question in as the presentation is going. As we get a lot of questions, it's hard for us to pick up questions at the end. So if you have anything, just pop it in there. If you want to talk to any other panelists, or any of the other attendees, or have any questions for any of the attendees who want to introduce yourself, please pop in the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. Please make sure the chat function is set to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see your comments. A reminder that the webinar is being recorded. All the webinars will be recorded, and you can find the recordings by logging into your Big Give account, going to your Christmas Challenge campaign dashboard, and clicking on the webinars article, and we're updating that article with the links for the recordings. So all that said and done, I will now hand over to Lindsay, who will take it from here.
Thanks, Sahil. Hello, everyone. Welcome back if you're with me on Monday for the introductory webinar to Big Give. Today, we are going to be looking at communicating and promoting your campaign, particularly looking at making direct appeals to people that you already know, people you've already got engaged in your organization. There are some more webinars coming up, which we'll link to at the end, including a panel with some of the award winners from last year's campaign, but also 2 specialist ones focusing on PR and storytelling and social media and storytelling. So that's where to go to for that information. Today, we're going to be looking specifically at how do you engage people on your mailing list, people already in your network. As Sahil said, my name is Lindsay, hello, and I work for the FSI, and we specialise in supporting small charities, particularly around fundraising, strategy, governance and impact. And before I was a trainer and consultant here at FSI, I was a fundraiser in small charities, including doing the Christmas Challenge for several years. So I have been in your shoes, I've done it from the other side as well. So I'm hoping to bring some thoughts from that experience too. But it's also a very different world to when I last did the challenge, which would have been 2017 would have been. It's a very different world. And so we've really adapted today's webinar to take into account the different world we and our donors are living in. So I'm sure that that's kind of causing a little bit of concern and questions from you. So I hope we can cover some of that today. As Sahil said, if you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A function, because the chat tends to fly by really quickly because there's so many of you. If you put it in the Q&A function, then that means we're more likely to see it and can answer it. And any ones that we don't answer, we'll do our best to answer afterwards, including if it's specifically about how Big Give works. Sahil and Alex can help you with that. If you've got any experiences and tips yourself, I'd really like to encourage you to share those in the chat box, related to what we're talking about in the sessions. You guys will have experience of different ways of communicating and sharing your message. So please do share that in the chat box too, your tips and thoughts. Oh, there's our logo, hello. So we've got an hour together today, just less now. I'm going to do my best to rattle through this as quickly as possible, but we're giving enough detail, leaving some good amount of time for Q&A at the end, because I know that's where a lot of the juicy stuff comes. You should have had access to the marketing guidebook beforehand, so you can access that in the resources section of your dashboard. There's some really, really good stuff in there. Lots of great examples, some templates and tools that you can use. So do check that out. I'm going to reference it a couple of times today. You don't need it to work through this webinar. Talked about Q&A. You will get the slides afterwards as well. And there are more webinars coming up soon. Do get involved with #ChristmasChallenge20. Share your top tips, what you learned today, other ideas you have, other questions you have that you also want answered. Get involved on that hashtag. So this is what we're going to be covering today. As I said, a little reminder about the campaign, and we're going to be thinking specifically about promoting your campaign, getting your message out, engaging your donors and your potential supporters, pulling that together into an actionable communications plan, because very few of us have huge comms teams, I'm sure. And there's some really good tips there. Again, the Big Give have so many resources out there for you, so do make the most of those. So first of all, a little reminder about the challenge itself. Well done to all of you for getting this far. It's brilliant. It's such a great opportunity. I think this is going to be one of the biggest Christmas challenges yet. Congrats especially to those of you who did manage to secure champion funding, which means that you've got that additional match pot. A reminder that all donations between the 1st of December midday and midday the 8th of December are going to be matched, and that comes either from your pot of your pledges and then your champion funds, or just your pledges if you don't have champion funds. Reminder again, access your dashboard for tons of resources, marketing advice, case studies, previous winners, advice, etc. And I know it's only halfway through October, but Christmas is going to come around before we know it. And if there's one thing I learned from doing the Christmas challenge for several years, is that planning is the key. It's going to be a bit of a crazy week for you. So the more you can do in advance and the more you can think through how to maximize your networks, the better. So there's no denying that this year is a very strange year, and COVID's had a massive impact on the charity sector as a whole, and specifically on fundraising as well. We've seen huge news stories almost every day, it feels, about you guys, charities, having to make really difficult decisions, making redundancies, closing programs, having to be really innovative with how you're fundraising. It's affecting charities of all sizes, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming at times. But we've also seen amazing examples of donors and charities and volunteers pulling together to meet this need, meet this time. And so there are opportunities within this as well. Christmas Challenge is one of those opportunities that's so important to give your donors and your supporters a chance to contribute positively during a difficult time and to make a difference. But nonetheless, the charities we're speaking to, we speak with lots of charities, our clients, our training attendees. A lot of them, the themes coming through are slightly similar in terms of what people's considerations are at the moment over the last few months. Firstly, how can we adapt our fundraising approaches, especially with social distancing? Perhaps you're coming up to the time where you would have had your carol services, or you've missed your summer fates, etc., or your donor events. You know, how can we adapt these things? Or we can't have coffees with our donors. How can we still engage people in a social distance world? Also being aware of the difficult time that everyone is going through, and people are in different positions financially, emotionally. So it's about how can we ask people to support in a sensitive way. It's something that we are naturally quite tuned into. It doesn't mean we shouldn't ask, however, but it's about how do we do that in a sensitive way that resonates with our donors. And with so much need out there, lots of groups facing real barriers and challenges, lots of charities really needing funds, how can we get our message heard? How can we tell it compellingly? I want you to have a think about, for your organisation, which one of these is the biggest concern for you at the moment? And perfect timing, so we've just launched a poll. So let me know which of these is your biggest concern, or is it something else? Pop it in the chat box if it's another one you haven't put there. Give you another 10 seconds or so if you haven't voted yet. Cool. Have we got a good number of votes? Let's close that and share the results. Okay, so quite a few people are being aware of kind of the need to adjust for coronavirus and be sensitive to need, but the overwhelming one is still getting your message heard. How can you tell that story compellingly? How can you cut through the noise and all the things that people are thinking about at the moment, even beyond your organisation and what's in front of them day to day? Brilliant. So hopefully you'll see that you're not alone in these concerns, and hopefully through this webinar we'll have a think about how we can get that message out there in a sensitive and social distance way. So in answer to the first point there, adapting your approaches. A good digital presence has always been essential to a successful Christmas Challenge campaign. We see that in the award winners each year. Your website, your email, your social media are really essential to getting that message out there, especially as it is all about online donations. There's lots of tips coming up in the future webinars, but also I think you've got access to previous webinars where we've talked about some things that we've seen there. But just because online is king, it doesn't also mean that we can't adapt what we were doing before. So think about what else is going on in your program. Do you have online events, or do you have even some social distance face-to-face events in the lead up? We can shout about your organization and your campaign. Think about what's already going on. How can you adapt that to get a bit of fundraising message in there? Or could you add some events to your program? We've had some brilliant stories from organizations during lockdown offering things like virtual tours of their building or Q&As with your trustees and program staff. I heard a brilliant example of an organization, one of our clients, who, when the London Marathon was cancelled, they got their 7 runners together on a Zoom call with 3 of their service users and a couple of staff members for like a virtual, just a chat, a coffee morning sort of thing. And it was a really wonderful way to keep those runners engaged and to bring them closer to the cause in a time when it would have been easy to let them kind of drift off. People, especially as the nights draw in and more places are going into tier 2, tier 3, we're going to see, we think, a revival of that Zoom program. Things like TED-style talks with experts in your field. If you've got lectures, those can be amazing things to offer to your service users, to your followers already, but also to other networks. Do you have corporates that you'd like to engage? You know, their employees are feeling a little bit distanced. You could offer something there to bring them closer. Community groups that you engage with, perhaps traditionally you go around to the Rotary Club every year and do a little presentation. Is there a virtual alternative you can offer? Don't forget, you can also ask your supporters to run their own events during the week as well, and therefore direct people to your campaign. Virtual pub quizzes. I mean, I've had my fill of quizzes forever, but I think there's still great examples of them going out, and it's about, at this point, becoming a little bit more innovative, really thinking about what your donors and supporters want and what need you can fill, and adding a little special touch. Bingo nights, a bake-off competition, a run or walk challenge, a physical challenge. What supporters would normally be doing something for you, and could they adapt it? Another client that I was talking to recently, they normally have a carol concert in December each year, and they've been able to get a small group of singers to do a virtual video, kind of pulling together, you know, one of those ones where everyone pops up on the screen doing a line each. And they've done that and launched that, had a little launch event, and they're going to do an auction around that as well. So getting a little bit creative, thinking about what's worked for you in the past, what need is there, what are your supporters after, and how could you adapt your approach to offer that virtually? Don't forget as well that personal approaches are still one of the most key ways you can do this, especially with your larger value donors. Even if you can't invite them for a face-to-face visit to your project or for a coffee or lunch, as you might have done previously to update them on what you're doing, telephone and video calls work really, really well as well. Don't just assume that you can't reach them, you can't do a one-to-one approach, it's only by email now. We can still have those calls. And in fact, donors who might previously have been very anti-virtual engagement, they're now probably talking to their children, grandchildren on Zoom, on FaceTime. They might be attending events online or streaming things from the National Theatre or from their local theatre that they would never have thought of doing before. We've had some really great examples of how these can work. So don't forget, think about what already worked for you and how you can adapt. I really like this example that was just actually promoted, a sponsored post on social media, which was a Rotary Club partnered with Shelterbox, which is kind of medium, large size charity, where they had a volunteer coming and doing a virtual talk for Rotary Club attendees, but also they've branched out wider. I'm not a member of this Rotary Club, but it was a sponsored post in the area where I was at the time to bring more people into this message. So think about, even if you're a complete novice to virtual events and it feels a little bit intimidating, there's some amazing advice out there online. We linked some later, I think. And talk to others in your field as well. Who have you seen? Other organizations, what have they done? What can you learn from that? A few top tips if you do a video call or an event or a call with a donor perhaps, and you're a little bit nervous about it, these are our top tips for making that success. Do email in advance to set up a time. Keep that short and sweet. You know, make the same way you would to organize a coffee or something. Be clear about what you're going to want to talk about. You know, perhaps I'd love to set up a time for a brief call to update you on how we're responding to coronavirus, what's going on with our programs. And also we've got our Big Give Christmas Challenge coming up soon, which I know you supported last year. I'd love to tell you about what we're planning for that. Hoping it will only take about 15-20 minutes, but it would be great to have a chat to you. Are you available Wednesday, Thursday this week? When would work? Make sure you're familiar and comfortable with the software as well, and you send the joining link well in advance. Do remember to log in a little bit early, make sure it makes sense and works for you. Some simple things, thinking about your lighting, your positioning, and your background. Think about what angle the screen is coming at for you. Try and make sure you can make some eye contact with the person you're speaking to. That can be one of the trickiest things to work out. You know, how can you make sure you can see their video, but also looking into the camera so you make that connection? You want to be able to still read their expression and the tone of their voice, even if you're on a call, paying attention to those cues. And do remember to plan and prepare just as you would a face-to-face meeting, and that includes knowing what your follow-up step's going to be. Have that email drafted already with your ask or more information or a link to how they can support the campaign. Do that planning in advance. And do lead with care and concern for your donor. This is one of the things we're seeing working really well, but also comes really naturally and sits much better with us. This is a time where you can really change the dynamic in your relationship with your supporters. We were hearing stories early in lockdown of charities calling their donors and the donor saying, you know, you're the first person I've spoken to all week, or it's amazing to talk about something else other than coronavirus. And that human-to-human connection is the foundation of good fundraising. And you can learn a lot more about them, where they are in their lives, what they value, and why they support your organization in these calls. So lead with those questions about how are you doing, how's this affecting you? And then naturally the conversation will start to swing around. But so if it's affecting me like this, I can't imagine how it's affecting your service users. Tell me about how it's going at X charity. Has anyone else got any tips? Who else has done a video call with a donor, or perhaps a group call or some kind of event? Any top tips from your experiences? Elizabeth asking for their suggestions. So is that in terms of your program? Yeah, brilliant. Normally keen to get involved. I think that's a really lovely point, Elizabeth, especially those donors who are really close to your organization and perhaps have been involved for a while, or perhaps bring a different perspective. Perhaps they support other organizations, have seen things go on, or their business has some opportunities. You know, ask for their opinion. I love that. Jonathan, scientist-led webinars on our international work. I mean, how fascinating is that? There's so many things that we kind of take for granted in our organization. We know that our team and our researchers are highly skilled and experienced and have great stories, because we see it every day, but your donors don't. Give them a bit of that behind the scenes that's normally difficult to do so. And Louise has some brilliant top tips from the practicality side. Make sure the light is not behind you. Excellent. So if you can sit by some natural light, I know I'm not the best example today. Put your mic on mute when not speaking. You can also, set some ground rules. If it's a group webinar, just say up front, I'm going to mute everyone by default. if that's what you want to go to, or don't be offended if I mute you because you've got some background noise. Set that up at the start. Brilliant. So Jonathan, you did those scientist talks for your major donors and legacy pledges. Really like that idea. Kirsty's idea, and a reminder to everyone, if you are copying the chat box, do drop it down so it says all panelists and attendees so everyone can see these excellent ideas. But Kirsty's experience here was using videos of clients talking about their experience, and that must be so compelling to hear it from them. And in a way, virtual offers up an opportunity to do that in a much more light touch, easier, less involved way as well. Oh, great, some more ideas coming through in the Q&A. Give them time to chat and connect together. I really like that, exactly. You know, at the end of the session, perhaps make it optional. If people aren't interested, they're zoomed out. But those who want to stick around, you know, that feeling of connection, if you've all been moved by a story you've just heard, or you all just learned something new, what a great way to stay on the call. Perhaps offer the opportunity to put out into some breakout rooms for some speed networking or some small group chats. You get them involved. The interactivity is key. And another great point, do your homework. Are they interested in what you do? So brilliant. Hopefully you've got a sense of what they've supported in the past. You can build on that. You know a little bit about who they are, what they care about, and you can relate your cause back to that. Another great idea coming in from Kirby, who hosted a virtual reception on Zoom before an online broadcast of a concert. Amazing. So just that little bit extra that gives you the chance to get that message out there, to really engage people. Some top tips from that were having an order of events, planning it the same way you would a face-to-face event, except with less health and safety or with less wires tripping around. Planning some questions to ask if there's not naturally questions flowing from the donors. I think that's brilliant. And planning what your plan B is. So if someone's internet goes down or they cut out, do you have a video that you could cut to, or is someone ready, the host ready to take over in the event of that? Brilliant. And Francis's top tip here was giving some people, some donors who gave online in the last 3 years and invited them personally to be the kind of seed donors for the big give to kickstart it. People love having that special personalized ask. And that's something that we can really offer as a small charity they might not get from other organizations. Fab. So many great opportunities and ideas coming here. I love this. And Angela, one final top tip, changing your sign off, you know, away from towards take care, stay safe, etc., acknowledging what's happening. So related to that second point that people were concerned about was asking sensitively. And as you said, leading with care and concern for your donor first. And in fact, we should be embodying this year round, no matter what's happening. That human-to-human connection is essential. You as an organization, as a fundraiser, are providing this donor with the opportunity to change the world and to make a difference. You're the conduit for that, so make sure, you know, they feel that you recognize the value of their gift and they understand the difference they can make. Do keep them updated on how you're responding. Be transparent. You know, if you've had to shut down programs, give the reasons for that, or kind of be transparent about how it's affected your organization. If you haven't sent an update to your supporters since March, I would suggest do it now so you've got some comms in before you're doing your Christmas challenge ask. Keep them updated. They will want to know and be interested. Make your ask relevant to the context of the communication. You know, one of the things that we've got at the moment that we don't always have the rest of the year or in normal years is we've got that sense of urgency. If you had core programs that you're fundraising for, you know, right now there is increased need or there is change need. There are new needs coming out. What is happening now? Why is that? Should that be relevant to you? Always asking that question, so what? I really think our empathy, and we talked about this on Monday, our capacity for empathy, and a lot of people has really grown. We're we're aware of so many challenges and needs that we weren't necessarily, not everyone was engaging with before. And be direct, nonetheless. Leave your supporter in no doubt about what you want them to do. Make it easy for them to give them the link, give them the ask, and be direct. They can always say no. Make it easy for them to say no. Give them other ways to get involved, but don't shy away from making the ask. A few examples of how people have adapted to give that more sensitive COVID message. This is from a charity called Best Beginnings around their summer challenge. So they acknowledge COVID and the impact on families, and then they move into the ask. So they really demonstrate the relevance of this ask right now, and they bring it to life through an image, something really powerful that tells that story. There's another example from Lollard Street Play, again from the summer challenge, really relating back, why is the need right now? Why now? This is something that a lot of our donors will understand. This is something they might have been through homeschooling their children or seeing their friends doing so. We can't ignore what's happened, and we can't ignore what is still going on. So tell that story and tie it into the wider need for your work. They've got the transparency here as well about why they've had to close and what their plans are for reopening as well. And this one from Lyric Theatre in Hammersmith over in West London. Again, they've re-grounded this in their overall aim. Like, this isn't an aberration from their normal mission. It's just exacerbated it and changed some of how they deliver it. So again, they've told that story. You can see the narrative going through here of the need for this work, the solution they've come up with, and the ask. The third area that we were looking at was getting your message heard. When there's so much noise around, there's so much need, people are thinking about so many different things. Here are some reflections for getting your message heard. Be targeted in your approach. Think about what channels your audience are already engaging with and what do they want to get out of that. So for example, your website is likely to be for a more general audience, so you want to make sure you're kind of explaining the context and giving the full picture, and you've adapted perhaps different pages for different audiences. You might have, if you've got corporate supporters, a separate page for them. Whereas emails, if you've got a sense of who's on your email list, what they've given before, can you do a bit of profiling to understand, can you segment based on what they've given before, what level they've given at, how long they've been giving, or to what do they give? Can you segment your messages to be more targeted? It is going to be harder to cut through the noise. And again, you'll hear more from the other two webinars later this month about how you get your word out there broader with PR and social media. But one of the core principles in fundraising is those that you're already engaged with. It's much more valuable to keep them engaged, increase their gift value, increase your retention. It's much harder to get new donors. Definitely recommend undertaking a bit of network mapping, which is an exercise you can do with your staff, your volunteers, your trustees, looking at all the different groups and segments that you engage with. Who do you already know in those groups? Who's on your wish list in each of those? And how can you get to them? So again, your warm prospects, those that you have a connection into already, will be your best bets. We went through this again on Monday, we talked about it. There's some good tips and a kind of guide for doing that in the marketing guidebook as well. And I definitely recommend getting some other people involved. It's always surprising when we do these with charities, how big their networks are. Even if you think you're a really small charity, not very well networked, you will know far more spider webs out than you realize. As I said, thinking about what do you already know about your audience and how they engage with you. Is it based on assumption? Is it based on conversations you've had? If you don't know much, can you find out more? You know, do you have any analytics about what emails or links tend to get the most clicks? Most mail servers allow you to look at that. What social media posts do best? What events have people come to before? Or even just talking to your volunteers or at your events, you know, what sort of conversations do people tend to have? Or your receptionist, if you've got someone who picks up the phone, what questions do people call asking about? Can you access any demographic information? Do you have that already? Do you know anything about the sort of jobs they have or where they live? You can start to build up some profiles. If you don't know any of that, you might want to consider doing a donor survey or some kind of engagement tool to get a bit more of a picture. This is also really useful in the long term for building up your individual giving program, you know, asking how they like to be communicated with, how they found out about you, what their motivations are. Or even just good old-fashioned telephone calls can be really powerful as well. Frame it as a thanking for their previous support or an update on what you're doing, and you can find out so much in those conversations. Thinking as well about what stories resonate with your supporters. Are you making assumptions? Could you get some perspectives? Perhaps is there some analytics you can use on previous fundraising campaigns you've run, what's really resonated? Or could you do some kind of focus group with some supporters to see what resonates, perhaps put forward a few different options, get their feedback? It's also a really nice opportunity to, again, build relationships. I remember doing this at my last charity when we were launching a new kind of major giving circle. I asked a trustee and a major donor to just have a look over the materials and give me some feedback, and they both came on board as donors, and that wasn't my intention at all. But again, as someone put in the chat earlier, asking for insight and experience as well. David Burgess, the fundraiser, talks about, particularly with Trustland, but he talks about the curse of knowledge being that when you know something, it's almost impossible to imagine not knowing it. So it's really important to get someone outside your organization or with a different perspective to check over or to give some feedback on what you're talking about to make sure that your message gets across. Here's a case study to inspire you from Action for ME. They talked about how they prepped and encouraged their supporters to give, and they built this up early, so they planned well in advance, and they did a little bit of a launch kind of teaser beforehand. So they built some excitement and some enthusiasm. They contacted previous givers by post, email, and telephone as well. That also gave them a bit of a sense of, you know, what the engagement levels, likely giving levels, were going to be like. And they really thought about all of their different comms channels. So they didn't just use their email list. They used telephone, they used social media, they used their membership magazine. They've got putting some things in there. Really involving all different people in your organization as well. They use their volunteers and other staff members to make sure as many people as possible know about the campaign and how they can get involved even before it launched. And they really focused on stories in their campaign. So they focused in on individual supporters, beneficiaries of the cause, and told their story in a very simple but moving way with those images. So this is from Martha, and all of these were framed around this "because of you" message. Because of you, I've been able to continue my education and study through the help of Action for ME. So bringing the donor right into the heart of that, right from the first 3 words. So as I said, in the other webinars, you'll hear more about broadening it out wider, but your email list is going to be one of the most important channels for getting that message across. So thinking about how you can grow that, make sure it's as up to date and you've got all the permissions you need in advance to use it. Now is the time to start thinking about that. And in fact, start thinking for next year and the year after that as well. Ensure this is an objective all year round, growing this list. Definitely recommend putting a sign up link on your website because you'll capture people who are already interested in some way. If they're browsing your website, you could put a pop-up on certain pages perhaps, but also think about where else are people engaging with your cause on social media. Even if you're not making a donation ask all year round on there, you can make an email list ask. Your corporate partners, could they circulate it on their intranet or among their staff members? That could really boost your signups. Putting it in your email footers, looking at some Google ads. There's Google ad grants, you get something like $10,000 worth of free ads promoting that. So if people are searching for, you know, animal charity in Hackney, you come up there and your newsletter can be promoted to them. Competitions or downloads, like, is there some sort of incentive for signing up? Could it be priority access to something? Could it be, or perhaps, you know, a petition or a survey where you want to get their input and then there's an invitation at the end to join the mailing list? What could you do that would really capture people's attention more than just sign up to our newsletter? Don't forget as well to put it on your donation forms. Make sure that ask is embedded in your donor journey already, so you're capturing people who are engaged. And member getting members. So can you incentivize or encourage people who already care about your cause to spread the word? You know, sending content with great shareable content that encourages them to forward it to others. Any other tips? Anyone's got experience of growing your mailing list? What works for you? Clara, you said you've used a supporter survey at the moment. Can you give us a little bit of information about what that looks like, what you're hoping to get out of that? Reminder to everyone to drop it down so it says all panelists and attendees rather than just all panelists. Cool, Clara, maybe let's keep that for the end of Q&A. That would be awesome. I think hear more about that. Cool. So really thinking across your whole organization, and this is why it's brilliant to get other people involved. And that's one of our top tips from Monday's webinar. Make sure this isn't just on your shoulders. Who else can you share the load with? Who else can you get to spread the word? Trustees, volunteers, your whole staff team, service delivery staff, your service users as well. Whose networks do you have? Whose input can you get? So there's lots and lots of ideas. And again, you'll hear even more in the upcoming webinars on PR and social media. But one of the key things here is turning this into an actionable plan. So it's easy to feel overwhelmed, especially if you're a solo fundraiser or a very small team, but starting to think about this in a really manageable and achievable way. There's three core elements to a comms plan. And again, we go into this in the guidebook. I think there's a really good checklist on page 14 and 15 of the guidebook. So I definitely recommend going back and looking at that. But you want to think about your people. So who are your target audiences? What are those segments? Your proposition. So what's your message? And again, we looked at that on Monday, so go back and look at that recording. But how can you, and we've also got some ideas here of how you can kind of tell that COVID story. And the channel. So how are you going to get that message to those people? You're going to use email, a one-to-one approach, etc. You might want to split your planning into a few different phases. So pre-launch, as Action for ME saw, building that excitement, getting people ready. The launch and the campaign. So you've got some key milestones and updates during that time. And don't forget post-campaign. You know, Big Give, one of the main benefits aside from the week itself is it can help you generate new supporters, bring new people into your organization. So you want to make sure you're maximizing that by following up, thanking, giving them updates, demonstrating the impact of what their support has done, and keeping them involved in the organization going forward. Consider some project management tools, you know, so as simple as a shared calendar. So you've got some diarized reminders in there, a spreadsheet with those stages and the different audiences, or an online planning tool. We use Asana a lot. I know people love Trello as well, especially as, again, you don't want this to all be reliant on one person. Share out the tasks and make sure there's deadlines assigned. Big Give is a pretty intense thing. You don't want, it's not the sort of thing where deadlines can slip. Don't forget as well with your comms plan, add in an element in the post-campaign of debriefing. What have you learned from this? Or what ideas did you have but they came up too late to action this year, but you want to put in place for next year? Capture that learning, even we have no idea what we'll be looking like next October, November, December, but there will certainly be useful learnings to take forward. You can do this remotely as well. This is an example from my colleague Janine, did this with the board she's on, who's doing the Christmas challenge. They did this on a tool called Jamboard, which is run by Google, but there's also things like Miro and Mural. I think lots of free tools out there. Just really starting to map out on some post-it notes, digital post-it notes, who those different segments are, and answering these key questions to pull this plan together. And they did this with the whole board and with the staff team on a Zoom call. And one final case study to inspire you. This is JRDF, the Type 1 Diabetes Challenge charity. They do the challenge most years, and it's a kind of really big moment for them. And they had a target of a whopping £110,000. This is their highest target ever last year. They smashed it. They got £110,632 from 473 donors. So they are a bit of a larger charity, but they smashed their target, and they really did this planning in advance and really thought through the steps. And I'm going to take you through them now. So they did a marketing plan for each of these 4 stages. So they had a teaser campaign, they had a launch campaign, they had the week itself, and they had that follow-up, that thank you. They planned this all in advance, including drafting key content, making sure everyone understood the key messages, having a plan for each communication channel, having a bank of images, case studies, stories ready to share on social media and in emails throughout the campaign. They did this as a team as well, so they had regular check-in meetings on progress updates to keep everyone motivated, to make sure things are on track, and they used shared Google Docs to kind of keep updated on progress. So that planning for these guys really paid off. For each element, they included these different kind of spokes to the plan. So they had some learnings from previous campaigns. They thought about what the audience was for each stage, breaking those segments down. Again, the messaging, so that promotional message, thinking about the channels, the content, and exactly what the tasks and deadlines and who was responsible for each task there. JTR, thank you, Holly. My bad. And finally, this was a really useful table to just bring all that thinking into one place. And in our experience, this is something that you guys do and know naturally. You do it instinctively, but pulling it together into a document can open up opportunities and makes it much more likely you won't forget things during the week, and it can bring everyone on board. So for every task, every activity, they had to be really clear on who the audience was for it, what the purpose of each communication was, and how they were going to go about doing it. So hopefully you can see, you could pull this together for your organization in an hour or so, involve some other people in coming up with the ideas, and you've got yourself a plan, and do this for each of those 4 stages that they talked about. So there we go, thinking about lots of different tools and ideas of how to engage people with your campaign and bring that together into an actionable plan. A few final tips from the Big Give themselves. Don't forget you're tried and tested. I know there's so many digital things out there that's very exciting. People are being very innovative. Innovation is amazing. If you've got great ideas, try them, test them, but also don't forget the things that work for you already, the ways people are already talking to your organization. Don't forget the power of a good old-fashioned phone call, or embedding it into ways that events and communications you're already doing. But as I said, this is a good time to try something creative, to try something new. Bring in other people. I love the idea someone said earlier about who else can help you generate ideas. You know, we're all a little bit fatigued of looking at our desks right now, but your supporters might see other ideas there. Your service users might have thoughts. So try some new things too. And don't forget to do the maths as well. This is a really good tip. Don't just kind of assume that everyone who receives your email is going to donate. We know that's not the case. What can you know about previous things you've done to look at what your click rate would be, what your donation levels would be? Can you logic it out so it adds up to your target? And if not, what else do you need to add in? My final top tip is to make sure you contact Hello at the Big Give. If you've got any questions, they are amazing at providing advice. Do log into that dashboard for your marketing guidebook and other top tips. And do keep in touch with each other. Use hashtag Christmas Challenge 20 to share your ideas and experiences. And we've got 15 minutes now for some final questions. So again, questions really welcome. Your examples and experiences really welcome. And do join the other webinars. So I'll hand over back to Sahil.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was really interesting. Yeah, we've had a couple of questions, so we'll kick off with that. We had one from Joy from Rain Ministries. What have others found to be best for links? To send people first to their own web page and then onto their Big Give campaign page, or link directly to their Big Give campaign page? Lizzie, do you have any opinions on this?
Good question. I think the general rule is make it as easy as possible for people to donate. So the fewer clicks, the best. So if you can link straight through to your own page on Big Give, that's going to be best. But Alex, you were saying on Monday about some people can use a redirect. So it goes to your website, but then automatically through to Big Give as well, which might give them a bit of comfort if they are expecting your website. Is that right?
Yeah, I've seen that. Charities use that in the past. If you've got, a lot of charities use WordPress for their websites. It's quite easy to do that on your WordPress. Or if you've got a web manager or someone looks after your website, you might talk to them about having yourcharityname.com or whatever your website is /Christmas or /Big Give, and then automatically redirect that to your donation page during the week of the campaign.
Great. And so next question, how can supporters running their own fundraising campaigns donate those proceeds to the Christmas challenge? Had a couple of questions on that. So in essence, all donations have to be made through the Big Give website between the campaign weeks to be matched, and we can only match donations made by debit or credit cards. So if fundraisers are using other platforms like Just Giving and so forth, we won't be able to match them. So one advice we have for fundraisers that are running those sort of events is they would need to collect those proceeds from the events into their personal account, and then when the Christmas challenge opens, make that donation with their personal credit or debit card. Another idea is that that event, whoever's holding that event, they could create a sort of donation promise form and ask people to sign up in that form. And then when the campaign opens, send them a reminder to make that the campaign is open and they can make the donation now. But yes, unfortunately, we can't match fund donations made on other platforms.
That match funding thing is so compelling. If you need to, it's a little bit more admin if they're used to using something else. But if you can tell the fundraiser, the volunteer, that it's going to be worth double, I'm sure they'll make the switch.
And so, yeah. And there was a follow-up question about gift aid on those types of donations. If someone is making a donation with proceeds from an event, that person cannot click gift aid or say that donation is gift aid applicable, as they are sort of making a donation on behalf of multiple people. Okay, next question. Yes, this is from Evie Rollinson. Is there any advice on how to get service users involved? They work with vulnerable young people, so she wants to be sensitive to their ask for their involvement. They have some photos, videos, and quotes, but is there any other way they can ask for them to get involved? Do you have any tips or ideas for that, Lindsay?
Yeah, I'd love to hear other people's experiences in the chat as well. But I would certainly say don't underestimate that. Remember, every gift of every size is super valuable, and often your service users are your best advocates for your cause. You know, they can talk about what it means to them, and they can spread the word. So don't make it a requirement or anything, but make it as easy as possible for them to do so. But also ask their ideas and opinions as well. Often when I work with charities that work with young people, they come up with, especially online right now, I know several of our clients that their young people have basically helped them convert their services online or helped them run an event because they're perhaps more digitally savvy. So ask their opinion too.
Great, that's great. Nice. Yes, and another good question from Jim. Cool. Do you have any list of common mistakes to avoid making in our campaign? I can kick off with that. Is yeah, charities that perhaps don't do well in Christmas Challenge from past experiences are the ones that have not planned or not been organized and not had all the communications ready and not made their donors aware that they're taking part before. Planning is probably the key to the campaign. That's probably the biggest mistake to avoid. Lindsay, have any, or Alex, do you have any other ideas?
I would say one of the biggest, not mistake, it's very easy to do, but really make sure you get that message right and that you're talking about the need in terms of the need for your service users or the need to change the world and bring people on that journey for you. The fact that you need to hit your fundraising target isn't a compelling ask compared to your gift will change someone's life. Your gift will help us not be in deficit isn't why people give. Your charity is a conduit to change, if that makes sense. So make sure you get that messaging and really bring it to life for people. And again, we talked about on Monday, focusing in on the story of one person can be far more compelling than all of the best statistics of the hundreds you've helped.
Yeah, for me, I watched a great documentary a couple of years ago about the New Zealand rugby team, and the kind of big takeaway from that is they always have a plan B. And I think that's probably a good thing to take into the campaign is, again, as Sahil has mentioned, sometimes when charities don't hit their targets, it's because they've been reliant on perhaps one person making a significant donation in the campaign and, you know, something happening during that week, they can't contact them, etc., etc. So always think about having a kind of plan B if it's not quite going your way during the week of the campaign. You know, a week is a short amount of time, but it's long enough that, you know, probably halfway through, you know, whether you're kind of on track to hit your target or not. Have that plan B in place. You know, maybe that's reaching out to your trustees to get in touch with their network, or having a kind of a backup ask if that's possible.
Great suggestions there. Yes, this is from Natalia. If we host an event during the week that people pay for, how do we ensure the money raised can go to Big Give? This goes back to what I previously said, that the donations need to be made through the Big Give website to be matched. If you're sort of selling tickets in advance, I think that probably the money will be going directly into your charity account before the Christmas Challenge starts, in which case that cannot be matched because charities cannot obviously make a donation to their own campaign. So going back to my previous suggestion, instead of sort of selling tickets, this is a way, create that sort of donation promise form, get people to sign up for the event, and then when the actual Christmas Challenge starts, send them a reminder that the campaign is open and they can make their donation. What is the experience of using Facebook ads? So this is actually going slightly into social media, but Lindsay, do you have any tips for this or any ideas?
Yeah, I'd definitely say James, you're expert on this, but I would say Facebook ads work best because Facebook's algorithm now, basically organic posts don't get a whole lot of engagement at all. So Facebook ads work well for pushing posts to people who are already following you. So making sure that people who've liked your page will definitely see a link. So I think that's the best place. You could also test it beforehand, as one of the examples was about building your email list in advance. So perhaps if you've got, you can target them really specifically at people who support similar organizations or who've been to an event or something. So it doesn't have to just be a donate ask. It could also be a get them signed up now. And certainly because Facebook ads are relatively affordable, it's a good thing for a charity to test. So if we do a bit of A/B testing, it might help you test the messaging. So if you've got two different case studies or propositions you're choosing between, you could test those both and see which one gets the most engagement.
Just probably to add on that is that unfortunately we can't put Facebook pixels on the campaign pages on the Big Give website. One idea would be to create a sort of landing page on your own website and put the Facebook pixel there, linking to your Facebook ad instead, and then seeing the click-through rate to the actual donation page. Next question would be, how do we get Big Give to share our social posts when we tag them? Yeah, we're active on social media, so you don't need to do anything special. Just tag us in your posts, and we'll share it. Yeah.
I would say on that, Sal, can I add to that? We love, it's really great when we see really rich media that's attached to that as well. So, you know, if you've got great imagery, I mean, this is a rule for social in general, not just stuff that we all try and retweet and like and create engagement in as many of your posts as possible. But it's much easier and better for us if we can do that when there's great content to share. So if you've got those, you know, the great stories to tell that Lindsay was talking about, if it's good images, good video, that's only going to increase engagement on social.
Good point, Alex. And next question, can companies donate, or is it just individuals? Companies can donate as well, as long as they have a credit or debit card to make a donation. And on top of that is from Jonathan, I have a corporate donut lined up for potentially substantial sum. This may be too large to go through via card payment. Can it be done through another route? First of all, we can accept donations up to £25,000 in value. Secondly, we can only match donations via credit or debit card. Because the match funding happens in real time and we need to make sure that donations are being matched correctly. This is why we can't match those offline donations, as someone has also suggested in the chat. What can we match checks? Unfortunately, we can't. We can only match credit and debit card donations. If you have donors that you may think this may be an issue for, individual donors I'm talking about, you can get those prepaid debit or credit cards. It may be worth reaching out to them now and seeing if they're able to get acquire one of those to make a donation in advance of the Christmas challenge. That would be my suggestion. But yeah, really, if you think this is going to be an issue, go after your donors now before the Christmas challenge starts and try and find a resolution to that, because unfortunately for us, it's a hard no on matching other types of donations.
And Sahil, just to say, Jonathan's just asked a follow-up to that, which is around, is backs an alternative?
Unfortunately not. Backs, checks, donations on other websites we cannot match.
And Jonathan, just to add, you know, Sahil's already mentioned this, but the kind of key reason for us is that it all happens in real time. As you can imagine, during the week of the campaign, there's hundreds, thousands of donors coming through the site. And so it's really important for us to be able to track the match funding in real time, which is why we insist on debit and credit cards as the kind of main mechanism to donate. So yeah, no worries.
Maybe with time for one last question, which is from Elizabeth Powell. We work with people who are visually impaired and don't always have access to emails or social media due to this. How would you recommend people get aware of the campaign? Lindsay, do you have any tips for them?
Yeah, and it relates to Kay's question as well about some donors are elderly and only use check. They might not be as online. My first thought is, again, going back to that thing of what channels do you already use? So if you have, as Action for ME, they put it in their print copy newsletter. They had a link and really clear instructions on how to go online and do it. So think about, are there ways, print does work, telephone as well. If you've got a small enough number or enough volunteers or trustees or team members who will help you out, ring them up and explain how they can log on and donate online. And also on Kay's point around elderly donors, I was on a great webinar from Open yesterday talking about the kind of fundraising through the second wave. And I can't remember the statistic, but it was something like online payments for groceries, etc., has trebled, or even far more than that, from the over 65s. And will it take 21 days to form a habit? This has been far longer than that, so I don't think that's going to go away. I think a lot more people are used to paying for things online than they might have been a year ago. I have in the past, if you can do this in a secure way, we had a major donor at my charity who didn't have access to the internet, and he would get the bus to near our offices, and I would go and sit with him in a cafe and help him do it, like bring my laptop and we'd do it together. That's probably not so appropriate now, but there might be a way you can talk them through on a WhatsApp call, a video call, or give them a ring.
Thanks, Lindsay. We have a couple more questions coming in. Lindsay, are you happy to go on for another 5 minutes? Great. So I know we're over time, so if people do need to leave, that's fine. This all being recorded, and we will be putting the links up in webinars after in your campaign dashboard. So what happens if we smash our target? Does only the target money get matched? Yes. So only the amount up to your match fund pot limit gets matched. Any donations in excess of this target are regular unmatched donations, but our terms and conditions says that this can be used for unrestricted purposes, those excess donations. The incentive for donors to keep on giving after you've hit the target is charities that have been awarded champion funding and have exceeded their target are eligible for the Christmas Challenge Awards, for which their monetary prizes. So if you hit your target early, let your donors know, and then tell them that this is the reason why they should keep on giving, that you can still be eligible for the Christmas Challenge Awards. Yes, good question. When is the best time to send a save the date message, Lindsay?
Yeah, I think traditionally about, you might want to give a mention of it in something, if you've got a newsletter already going out in October, November, and then I've done big kind of save the dates 2 or 1 week in advance. Because again, it's not like an event where they actually have to save some time, but it's just building that excitement. And I said on Monday as well, I've done it before, where I asked people, they could like click if they wanted a reminder specifically when it launched. So everyone got a reminder anyway, but it just helped. What's one of the rules about get people to say yes as many times as possible before you make your ask is going to drive them forward. So do you care about our cause? Yes. Would you like to have your donation doubled? Yes. And then when you actually come to the ask, the yes is easier.
On top of that, someone has asked, does asking people to wait to make a donation, is that off-putting, do you say, or do you think, or do you think donors are understanding of that and it's quite successful? Do you have an opinion on that, Alex?
I don't mind going first and then Lindsay jump in. So similarly to Lindsay, before I joined the Big Give, I used to work for a charity, and we used the Christmas Challenge as a fundraising tool, and I had that exact same situation. I had a donor who kind of religiously gave us kind of £1,000 each year around September time, and one year I asked him to kind of put it off and say, would you mind kind of giving it in December instead? And they received that really well, and we're happy to kind of for us to send them reminders. And then because he was so compelled about the matching offer, he ended up donating £2,000, which is then doubled to £4,000, gift aided, etc. And he just loved the concept and told his kind of friends and network about it. So that's a very good news story, and I appreciate not everyone will be like that, but I think the match funding offer is so compelling that it may well be worth asking people to kind of hold off and give in the challenge. But obviously, ask your donor if they mind doing that, and tell them the reasons why. If they say no, then don't turn down the money, obviously. But I hope that helps.
Exactly, I'd echo that. I think for donors where you can have a conversation with them, and in fact, it's a great conversation starter. If you can have a telephone call or explain it, I think, as Alex explained, it can be really compelling. I would be, again, put the messaging on your website, your donate page, but don't actively dissuade people from lower gifts in the months leading up to it. But do explain, if you've got a message early enough, in the year, it might persuade them of their own volition.
Great, thanks both. I think we have hit that 5-minute time limit. If anyone does have any questions that have not been answered, or you think of any questions after this webinar has ended, please feel free to email us at hello@thebiggive.org.uk, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. With that in mind, thank you all for joining the webinar today. We hope you will join the next webinars coming up. The next one is next Friday. That's the Ask the Panel with the award winners from last year. Thank you again to Alex and Lindsay, Lindsay especially for taking us through how to connect with donors. Yeah, thank you all, and I hope you all have a good weekend.
Thanks everyone. Take care.